So good morning, everyone. Let's start with our daily market commentary. So let's first start with the global markets. So we basically have S&P 500, and what we are looking over here is the weekly chart of S&P 500. Now, the most important part to understand over here that S&P 500 is consolidating at the higher levels. So this time when it went down, first time had a good rally, and this was a huge steep fall on the downside. A continuous V-shaped recovery came in and then it slided down, but now the downsides are getting smaller. So when we see over here, this was a brutal fall, but which was basically bought out, and then again this was a bigger fall than the prior one. So this basically showed that some kind of upward rally was stopped, but then you have one more good recovery coming all the way. Now the most important point to understand, these were the prior highs roughly in the same zone where S&P 500 was almost trying to go in this range. Now, when it comes back, this time it's not trying to go down all the way. So one thing is clear that the downside gets limited for S&P 500, and then again what we see over here, the first downside, and then you have a bounce back, making a new lifetime high. It comes back all the way, but does not come to its prior zone. So that shows that the bullishness is still intact. So when you are trying to just look for this kind of second attempt of downside, or you can say kind of second bottom, but here this doesn't come all the way down. So that shows some kind of bullishness is intact. Now the most important point to understand over here, if these levels are not taken out, it will start with a new upward market. So for S&P 500 on the global perspective, the market seems to be very much aligned for a good upside. Right, so this way the global picture looks to be good, but obviously there are a lot of uncertainties compared to China and all those kind of stuff, trade war. But try to understand during the uncertainty, even if one good positive news will come through. So let's say the trade war gets resolved to some extent, then you will see S&P flying all the way higher. So it's already made the ground even in the uncertainty times, and then you can have a big shoot on the upside. So that's a positive cue coming from S&P 500. Let's also take the dollar index. So you have already Fed meetings all the way, and they are trying to say to reduce the Fed rates and stuff like that. But what we see, even after reduction of the Fed rates, we have seen the dollar index continuously strengthening. So after one kind of rise which took place, it's been going slowly and steadily on the upside. So even if dollar rates are reduced, Fed reducing the rates, the dollar is still more strengthened, and it's still going on the upside. And most important point over here, it's been in the consolidation range for quite a long time. So if we see over here, there is a good room for upside for the dollar index. So inching towards 100 or inching towards 101 or so is very much likely. And if you see after a good consolidation, the higher lows are made, and it can now inch much on the higher side. So the dollar seems to be stronger. That's very much aligned, and that's where even USD/INR will basically inch towards 71, 72, 73 kind of zone. So let's also see USD/INR. We have seen that USD/INR, after going through a huge upside, came all the way down and then settled on the sidelines. But what we see was a huge dip which came through over here in this area was bought by. That clearly shows that this is now the bottom, and last time also it came over here, again it tested the same, and then you have the upside coming through. Now for time being, USD would have basically made an upside move, and it might be capped over here. If it comes down back, so majority of times you can see the downside will be like 50% retracement of this rally, which will somewhere come around the 70 zone. So 70 and 70.5 will now become a good reversal trade to take in if you want to be bullish on USD/INR. So dollar being strong and USD/INR is basically poised for a good upside. And after a big up move, which came very fast, obviously it will rest for some time. And if it will rest till 70.3, and then if it starts going upwards, be ready for a higher 73, 74 zone coming back very, very quickly. right? So that's where you have a global perspective. The dollar is strong, S&P 500 on good footing, and now you have USDINR also inching on the higher side. So the export-oriented companies, the TCS, Infosys, will be flying high on back of these upside coming in dollar. So the downside in dollar is very less, right? It can come down, consolidate at these levels, but if dollar index remains intact, you will have an upside in dollar towards 74 or so. So keeping that in mind, now let's try to understand what has happened on the crude, where some kind of uncertainty was there. The crude was almost sliding down, and suddenly a news came. It basically shooted up, and those kind of stuff. But try to understand on the bigger time frame. There was a good up move which took place, came back all the way, again tried to reach up, again came back. So now when we see the last rally over here, where you have a good upside, which is like 50% of these high to low range, or swing high and swing low. The most important point to understand over here, this is where the cap of crude oil comes into place. So even after this going upside comes all the way, a good red Moribazu does not go below this, and then it goes down, tries to sustain. Now after these red candles, just see it's been making a pause around this 58.60 mark, and you have a huge gap up coming through, and which is being sold. Now, we cannot say crude coming back towards 52 or so. The gap will get filled, and then we need to see whether it goes further down or not. Mostly, it will again start going on the upside. So, the most important point to understand over here, the crude has and will remain range bound, right? So, these are just temporary moves, which we basically saw some of the important points taking place, kind of geopolitical tensions. But if you see on the broader time frame, the crude has made a floor of 52, 53, and on the higher side 71, 72. So you don't need to be worried about crude based rally coming through. It's not going to come through very very fast. So we can basically be there that at least this can provide good support towards the Nifty or Bank Nifty. So ideally now when I see over here, crude is not for a big upside, but yes, it might go in the range bound mode. Maybe around 60 to 70 range will basically remain precise. So 58 to be more precise, 58 is now still a good baseline for crude, and then you have almost towards 70 or so. So that's the basic idea of crude. Crude not going anywhere around, but USD INR will have a good upside which can come through. Right, so that's very very important to understand. Okay. After understanding the global market where S&P seems to be on a strong footing, let's also go out and see Nifty. Now, what we see over here is the weekly chart of Nifty. So these are just simple moving averages. But if I see even Nifty, there are two important things to note over here. This was the last uptick rally which took place, and it was completely sold. So I can say more or less the worst fall which we had seen from the top, one way downside, was brutal, and it was very fast during the ILFS crisis. It made a bottom, it went almost sideways, okay, over here, and then you had one more marching of upside coming through. Now this march of upside which came through did not have much downside to it, and then again it came up almost making fresh highs and then kind of sliding all the way down. Now it is inching towards a good consolidation zone once again. So last time the consolidation zone was around this 10,600 to roughly around 10,900 zone, which was taken out and a good breakout took place. Now try to understand, prior to this good breakout which took place, right, ideally it went sideways for a very long time, right? So when we see over here, there was a huge sideways congestion taking place on Nifty after a huge round of selling. So brutal selling took place, and then it went almost sideways for a couple of months, and then you see a good upside coming through. So ideally now when I see over here, a brutal selling has yet not taken place. From the high, it has corrected. If you see brutal selling means these kind of long red candle followed by one more big red candle. That basically shows back-to-back selling coming through, which has not happened as of now over here. So a strong foundation or the base getting formed is only formed when huge round of selling comes through. And if you see over here, the selling comes, the buying comes, selling comes, the buying comes. So what happens over here? It's kind of consolidating in this range. So to be more precise, the last low which was made around this 650 kind of zone, that's going to remain the base for now. But if we see over here, on the upside also it is capped towards 170, 200 zone. So more or less Nifty seems to be in the range bound mode, but ideally if you see over here it has downside open towards 630 and around the 750 kind of zone. So downside is still intact, and after this you need to understand that the consolidation zone will be intact, right? So there is no clear view coming through Nifty. Now ideally when we want to see when will this Nifty go on the upside towards 11,130 or 200 plus, it's only possible on back of earnings, right? So till earnings do not come in, either two things will happen. So I'm not bullish at all on Nifty above this 11,200 mark, but I am very much concerned that if earnings do not pick up, then a downside beyond this 650 mark can bring us straight away down towards 10,000, right? So the halts are not there if the earnings do not pick up. So next two quarters are going to be very, very crucial for Nifty. So you have 10,400 mark, which is one of the stoppage point that we can think of. So one is this 10,650, because this is the prior support base which was intact. Once this is taken out, you have 400 and then you have 10,000. So a three-way fall can come through, and it's very easy to come through unless the earnings do not pick up. So the next two quarter is going to be very, very interesting, and more or so it is more biased on the sell side, right? But the good part over here, US dollar index is going to remain strong, S&P is going to remain strong. So there is no something bad news coming from the, at least from the charting point of view, but there are few trade views, trade war issues which are still going on. But ideally for Nifty, I see 10,650 to around 10,700 zone, which is very much almost aligned, which can come through. So that's number one to understand. Number two, as I said, if the earnings do not pick up in next two quarters, you are seeing 10,400 and 10,000 coming along the way, right? So the only if earnings come through. So let's say if it reaches over here and earning comes through, the ceiling is again intact towards 11,100 or 200 zone. So it's not going to be very easy to remove 11,200, right? So upside is only seen after this 100 to 200, 11,200 taking out. Otherwise, we are more biased on the downside. Even when you look from the daily perspective of Nifty, understanding how the consolidation zone has been by. If you see over here, it's all the way, it goes up, comes back down, goes up, comes back down. And this is where it's very much clear that it's now going almost in the consolidation zone. Ideally now when we see the red candles picking up, 2 days going sideways above the base, it can trigger an upside. So these are small rallies which will always come through. And then again we see a huge red candle of yesterday, and now we are seeing a good support building in. So let's see if 10,790 or 780 is taken out. If that is taken out, we are seeing straight towards 650. So more of downside rather than upside is quite visible. But after the red candles, if you want to take a small cheeky trade on intraday being bullish, please try to understand on daily perspective what's happening on Nifty. So then you can take some intraday trades if you want to. So ideally, the biasness basically remains on the downside. So that's pretty much clear. And the important level now for this week or so, you can say 780 is an important level to look by. And after 780, it is straight towards 650. And we know after 650, it is 400 and 10,000. Right? So downside is still intact. If some kind of relief rallies will come basis of announcements by finance minister, but try to understand it will not sustain. Right, so that's where the consolidation zone is building up. If it happens for 3-4 weeks or so, then you can see the prior time when huge rally started. After the consolidation zone over here, the same rally will start this time also. But there are two important things which I will be bullish upon. I'll be bullish only if the earnings pick up, unless I'm not looking out for these kind of up move rally taking place. Right, so that's very, very important. And if we see kind of consolidation also getting more squeezed in, right? Kind of a triangle consolidation is taking place. So let's see how it pans out. Now there is a more interesting view on Bank Nifty than Nifty, because what we see in Bank Nifty, where there is large amount of downside has come in Bank Nifty over Nifty. So if we see over here, the last time when I've seen that a fall coming through for Bank Nifty was roughly around 24,000, made kind of W on the weekly charts and then started rising all the way high. then kind of made M at the top and now came back all the way down. Now, most important point to understand on Bank Nifty. Bank Nifty has entered in the good support range, right? So this is a good support range where last time the rally took place for Bank Nifty, killing the consolidation base over here. And the ideally now when I see the same base is respected. So after a huge red selling also, we can see kind of this base is been respected. So 26,700 is a good base which is respected. This is for the first time a small bounce came by. This might be the second time when the bounce can come by. Now, ideally, to understand over here, even for Bank Nifty, 28,200, 300 becomes an upper zone. So Bank Nifty will also not go on the upside unless this 28,300 is taken out. So one thing is again very clear for Bank Nifty also it is remaining range bound. Now the most important point to understand for Bank Nifty, if 26,600 is taken out, right, the downside is open. So straight it is 25,600. So 1,000 point downside on Bank Nifty, and then you have one more clinging towards the base 1,000 point downside. So I'm more worried on Bank Nifty because if Bank Nifty starts colliding, okay, and then we have 1,000 points going through, right? Bringing Nifty 10,000 will be very easy. So that's where we need to be very focused as to what's happening on Bank Nifty rather than Nifty, because Bank Nifty seems to be much more fragile compared to Nifty. But ideally, this is still intact, 26,600. Then it is 25,600 and 24,600. So ideally, huge downside is possible in Bank Nifty, but this can be a good base for Bank Nifty. Let's see and hope that it does not breach this. Now, ideally for Bank Nifty, we can look at first the heavyweights of Bank Nifty, even on the daily side. So like HDFC, Twins, and what's happening on Kotak, Yes Bank, Axis, ICICI. But before that, if you see again here, the consolidation zone is intact for Bank Nifty. So there's not much consolidation yet for Bank Nifty, but ideally when we see this, it's not been able to sustain on the higher side. So good selling always comes through on these higher sides, and that's where we need to be little worried. But ideally, below these levels of 26,600 or 700, there is more downside open for Bank Nifty. Now let's go out and try to understand HDFC Bank and let's say Kotak Bank and the heavyweights which are there in Bank Nifty. So are they also showing a huge downside view with respect to Bank Nifty or not? But if I see on HDFC Bank, it has corrected a lot, and that's a good pointer for us. And when we see over here, good consolidation was made and it's come back to the same zone. So HDFC Bank corrected and now it is almost kind of inching in the consolidation zone. So that's a good pointer for us that at least we can get support from HDFC Bank. Coming out towards Kotak Bank, that also has remained strong through and through. But the more important point in Kotak Bank, after a huge upslide, it came down once over here, and this might have a little bit of downside coming through. So Kotak Bank, we can see some space of downside which is still open because the rise had happened very fast, and that's where the downside can also come through. So Kotak Bank after this 1420 kind of stint can straight away come to what 1320 or so. So a huge correction is possible in Kotak Bank because it's been trading on the higher side. So correction has not been seen. Axis Bank and ICICI Bank both has seen good amount of correction. So that's also a good point for us that both these banks, which are also heavyweights, have seen correction. So when I see on the upside, this was intact, and now when we see Axis Bank making new lows. Now the interesting part of Axis Bank over here continuously been making around the same vicinity of lows. Now the most important point, once it breaches out, then you have more openness in Axis Bank on the downside. So Axis Bank can show some potential downside. So straight away 600 is quite possible in Axis Bank because the rally started from here, and then after this there is a free fall towards 540. Now this can only happen if there are certain NPA issues coming out next quarter or so. The Axis Bank is not seemingly to be positive, but one more point over here, kind of double bottom getting formed. Above this, it can show some strength on the upside as well, and the upside can also come very fast, right? So both ways, Axis Bank is there. Kotak is more on the downside possibility. Axis Bank also has a little bit of downside, but even after correction. Now, ICICI Bank in all said and done, ICICI has not corrected a lot. So that's also a good pointer for us that some strength seen in this heavyweight of ICICI Bank also. So on the higher side, it was like around 430 or so. Now it is coming back to the lower zone where a good support range is basically placed. So that's good part for ICICI Bank. But below this, we can see a straight fall happening towards the prior zone of 340 or so. So before that, still the supports are there. So Bank Nifty doesn't seem to be that fragile where its structure seems to be because the components are showing some kind of strength. But again, I'm trying to tell you till next month of the quarter, right? So the October month where the earnings comes through, till then everything will be in the hunky dory state or maybe in the sideways zone. So do not try to get in and take positional trades and just trying to get, you will be butchered on both the side. When you try to be bullish, we try to be bullish at the base, right? Since we are reversal format of traders, but still try to see every rise comes by, a selling comes through very, very fast, right? So that's where it's kind of be short-lived profits will come through. So better to go in intraday strategies rather than taking positional trades as of now. You will get a chance. That's what I'm trying to say. You have September getting out of your way, then you also have October coming all the way, and the earnings will start. So that time might be a good relief rally will start in October month. It will come back in November and then December you can see an upside December to Jan or so. So wait out for earnings to get through before any trade to take by because it's going to be a good consolidation move taking place, more bias towards the downside. Let's also take some of the heavyweights of Nifty. So LT, Reliance, Infosys, TCS, all of these stocks have corrected a lot. So when I say even L&T over here, when I see over here, it's very, very clear that from the top, it corrected all the way. And now also it's under the consolidation mode where a prior supports are there. So good bounce coming through. It can come back towards 1280 or so. But one thing is for sure, it is coming towards a very crucial support zone. So downside side in LT is not much. Coming back to Reliance, which saw a huge gap up opening after the results and announcements and so on. And all this on the upside was sold by, again, it was sold by, again, it jumped up over here during the uh, annual meetings and announcements, and then it is again being sold by. But the good point, Reliance is basically entering into a good support zone. So even if it falls from this and roughly around this, it is entering in the support zone also. So downside can be limited because of the heavyweights, right? So, but the fall can come in the allied stocks rather than the heavyweight. So when we see Infosys, it's been striding high. So this was a good support range. This was a good consolidation range. And I don't know how many people have tracked the results of Infosys was fantastic. And they also gave a good positive guidance on growth. So that's where Infosys will not see a good downside, right? So even if it comes back to this range of 770 or 790, I would say it is a good trade for positional in the result month to take on, right? So keep an eye on Infosys on a strong footing, and also we know that dollar will come down momentarily, but it will stride on the higher side. So in that way, if it comes down towards the 760 mark, it can be a good trade to take in the October one. So Infosys on a strong footing. Then you also have TCS, and when we see TCS, it's in the same line of Infosys, but there's a huge difference in TCS and Infosys now. Now, let me explain the difference. Over here, if you see, the TCS has been going up slowly and steadily, right? So there's no ferocious ride on the upside. But one thing is pretty clear that when I see TCS, it's basically coming towards in consolidation zone. So on the upside, we know these were the highs which were made, and now you're seeing continuous selling all the way towards 2060 can come by. And if there is some kind of dollar relief or INR becoming stronger, coming down to this range of 2050 towards 2000 is very, very easy. But again, I'm trying to say these will be good trades. When it comes back down and continuous 3-4 weeks selling is coming by, kind of W getting formed on daily structure can be a good trade, positional trades to take on Infosys and TCS. So ideally, we need to understand that these structures will remain intact. And when what I see over here, the heavyweights are making a good positive stance, specifically TCS and Infosys. Now, ITC is also one of the stock which also has good amount of weightage in Nifty. right? So if you see over here in the case of ITC, it's been on one way downstream. Now that's where the worry comes in. Okay, the only stock which is not supporting Nifty in any form is ITC, right? So that's where we can see even yesterday big fall came by because of HDFC twins. But if we see, Reliance did not go down, ITC did, L&T did not go down, TCS, Infosys did not go down. But what I see over here, the last 2 months, TCS has been butchered, and this is one of the heavyweights, right? The third, fourth heavyweight of Nifty, and that's where Nifty is feeling downside stress most of the time. Even if I change this on the monthly perspective, just to understand what's happening on ITC, and this is where we are more worried. So this was the last ride to place, went all the way sideways over here, kind of consolidation on the monthly charts, and then a huge uptick came by, came back all the way down, uptick came by, came. So ideally, these are not positive signs. And this is clearly showing that ITC is in no mood to make new highs, right? So all the heavyweights, if I see, L&T has been making high, Reliance has been making high, and this ITC is not playing the tone, right? So this is basically not in the positive format. And now also, if you see, this was a good support zone with being getting taken out, and it can reach towards 222 or so. So 222 remains the first support line, we can say, but after 222 we have further downside in ITC. So this will become like Tata Motor kind of fiasco. Things are not looking good on ITC front, right? If FMCG companies do not post earnings, they will have further more downside coming through. But ideally, if it comes here and Nifty is still intact, that's a good sign for us, because then he will bounce at least one, or in this vicinity he will bounce at least one. So I think the next contributor to bring Nifty down is ITC. And if it stops at good support points and bring in kind of short relief rally on the upside, will help us to also look for the upside for these stocks like ITC. But do not try to take trades in ITC, because ideally these won't give us good positive trades. So try to be a little bit cautious. If the ITC is not pulling it up, right, Nifty will keep facing downside. So there's one more HDFC Bank we had seen. We have to see HDFC. So HDFC twins have been going down for last 2 weeks or so. And when we see HDFC on the upside, the support area on the monthly side, this is like the monthly chart, good support area is there. But again, the point comes out to be very clear. After this, they have a downside open. So even on HDFC, you have downside, which is still open on the monthly chart. But ideally, if I see on the weekly chart, it's basically coming in a good support area. So if you see the last time these were the resistances, it zoomed up, came back down. So it will be in a good support area. But here, little bit downside is still open for HDFC. So what we see in the September month, there can be one ride of downside coming through because of, let's say, ITC, L&T, Reliance, HDFC, and we can see Nifty hovering towards 10,600 mark. So that's very, very clear of downside possibility more compared to upside. And once the earning season starts, right? So you're coming back to October in the second week or so, then you can look at a good upside coming through, right? So small positive recovery will come in the October month, not in the September month. Even if the announcement comes by the finance minister, we need to be cautious. All these rally will be sold by. Let's also see another FMCG giant, Hindustan Unilever. So HUL has been on the positive footing. Now, if you see the huge difference between ITC and HUL, it's making high, coming back, making high, coming back, making high. Now, this last upside, which was taken up by HUL, now it will come back down. So I'm seeing downside possibility on HUL also. By considering all the Nifty stocks, it's very clear I am not positive on Nifty, right? So it's better by the end of September, a good downside comes through. Let's say when HUL goes down, and we basically are sitting in October month where earnings will come through, and market should be in downside towards 10,600 mark. There you will see a good rally coming by. Even in the commodity space, you have Tata Steel, and so obviously we're not trading Tata Steel, Hindalco, Vedanta, but one thing is sure, the commodity international is down. If international commodity prices are down because of the trade war and the Chinese productions have been cut, and that's where the commodity intake by Chinese has gone down. And what we see over here is the state of global economy. And that's where you see Tata Steel hovering from 700 has become 350 kind of zone, straight 50% downside. And whenever commodity stocks goes down 50% or 60%, you can see a huge rally coming through, right? So this is the last stage of downside which has come by, and you can see now huge rally coming through the commodity space also. But the most important point here is trying to consolidate in this zone 370 kind of mark. But once it goes out of this consolidation phase, let's say trade war gets sorted out, okay, and then you'll have 440 coming in no time. So that's where the commodity space, so here 500 coming back on Tata Steel is very prominent. So it can come, it will come very fast. Now try to understand some macro event which you need to take care of. This is September 1, okay, and the next month, if you try to see, so next year, if you try to see, is the Trump election which is coming by in US. Okay, so he would want to solve the trade war issue, and he would try to get again into presidential place. So try to understand. I see positive things coming through in the next 3 to 6 months. So globally things can become stable, and try to understand if globally things become stable, we just want two good earning seasons, right? So that's very important to understand from the global point of view. Now another point to understand over here, even the Bajaj Finance, the NBFC space is also doing good. And if you see the last time, he had given good earnings, but we had seen some kind of NP issue clinging in, and that's why from the base of 2900 or 3000, this guy came back almost towards this 2900 to 3000. This was another rally which came through, but ideally, if it is very clear, this is kind of W getting formed over here, right? We'll have one more slide of downside coming through almost towards 3100 or so. Let's say if Nifty cracks towards 10,600, you'll see one more slide. This is loss of momentum on the weekly chart. So the fall will be brutal, maybe around 300, 400 points on Bajaj Finance. But try to remain intact, because this is the kind of W getting formed. The spikes are eaten out, and then if you come over here and you're entering in the earning season with a positive expectation of Bajaj Finance, you can keep seeing the upside all the way through, right? So that's also a positive structure which is in place. Now globally the interest rates are going down, the yield curves are inverted, but do not worry about that, right? There was a recent interview of Ray Dalio, and where he said that right now the recession or possibility of S&P going down is 25%. So he's not basically saying a threat is there on S&P or so, and that's why when we try to see this dollar index is strong, and if we see the SPX, it's very clear that whatever the news may be, market is anticipating something else. Please try to understand. If you ask anyone, they will say the markets are worst or bad. But if you see over here, the structure which is intact, and this is only a sign of positive bull market, right? So do not try to get away by the news. As I'm saying, if the trade war gets resolved in next 3 to 6 months, where chances are very highly likely because the election's coming up, and if that happens, it's going to go up one way. And for us in Nifty, for next 2 quarters, if earnings pick up, some kind of positive news comes through earnings, then you are seeing a huge rally in Nifty as well. But Nifty will take time because it's not already at fresh 52-week high. S&P is basically where the zoom will take place. So keep that in mind. Having the global perspective where people are more negative, I am not, and this is very clear sign that the globally things can turn out to be positive in next 3 to 6 months, right? So that's very important. Now obviously the index needs to be seen more compared to the stocks, and if you see the mid cap index or the small cap index, where the story is something very different. So the mid cap and the small cap, if we try to understand what has happened in that space, and that's where everybody is more worried about the market, because many people have lost money in small cap and mid cap. But if you have true potential companies in your portfolio, you do not have to worry about small cap and mid cap. Now if you see on the weekly slide of weekly structure of mid caps from the highs, right? So straight away on the highs which were there, a brutal form came by, went almost sideways, good consolidation, another round of fall coming by, kind of recovery, and you might have one more fall. This would be the last fall of mid cap if it comes by, right? So should we wait for this fall and then start participating in the market? Absolutely not. Start buying companies which are good at all the levels, right? Please understand this is like 22,000, and when you have 13,000, 60, 70% downside coming in mid cap, try to look for positive, strong mid cap stocks, right? So that's what you need to look at. Look at the emerging leader list which we have, and you can see a good portfolio construction coming by. Now try to understand, many people do not even know. If we go to the monthly chart and try to understand what happened in 2011, 12, 13 before Modi ji came into power. But ideally, when I see over here, this was the worst time for mid cap, right? This was the sluggish format of mid cap. And after this huge consolidation, it also went down 30% or so, right? Second time. And then if you see, a huge rally came by. So I am seeing one more round of downside in mid cap is quite possible. But obviously, these downside has to be bought. Now, you cannot time the market, keep buying good companies at all levels, keep putting money in the market, and then for next 3 to 5 years, you will have a good positive move once the earning or the economy of country starts improving. So that's very, very important to understand. From higher side, the mid caps have already collected roughly around 40% or so. More 20% downside is quite possible. Use that opportunity to buy and put strong stocks in your portfolio. Second, when we look at the small cap where the space has been more interesting, even if we go on again on the monthly chart, and if you see on the monthly chart straight, good things on the small cap, what has happened? It has consolidated and then zoomed up. Now the small cap has already come in the consolidation zone. So even if a downside comes in small cap, now that is the last downside of small cap. So roughly around 10,000, which was the high, it's already 50% down. It might go another 1,000 point down or so, can bring him down 60 to 70%. 70% of downside, okay, on small cap is a huge buying opportunity. Now try to understand between small cap and mid cap. Small cap will not take a rise very, very fast. So it might take another 3 years in small cap rally to come by. So small cap, because there are a lot of B2B companies rather than B2C companies, and that's why they take a lot of time to revive. So this you need to understand. Small cap, participating in small cap will not give you a good gain, handsome gains coming in next 3 to 5 years. But more so, participating in mid cap in the last slide of downside, which will come through, that will give you a good gain in 3 to 5 years. So participate first in mid cap, and then once you start getting a bottom formation happening in mid cap, started going up from these zones, then you start moving into small cap. So I can say for next 1 year or two, 1.5 years, I'll focus on mid caps, and then I would like to go for small cap. So not in hurry for small cap as of now, but I'm very much interested for mid cap, and it's a clear signal that more downside is available in mid cap as well. So that's what I'm trying to say. The next 2-3 quarters are going to be extremely crucial. Even Prashant Jain interview, the last interview, where he has cited that next 2 quarters have to be more interesting. And if some kind of relief rallies do not come by, or some kind of earnings do not come by, then things are going to be very, very difficult for Nifty to come on the upside. So that's the basic idea over here. And the IT stocks among all. So you have many IT stocks, Infosys, TCS, barring that, let's say Tech Mahindra, Wipro, all these stocks, try to avoid these stocks, because these stocks are not going to gain as compared to Nifty and TCS and Infosys. So what I see on, let's say, Tech Mahindra over here. So after a huge downslide, after the buyback thing of 800 or so, came back all the way towards 600. It's on the positive rise. It can come towards 770 or so. Then again, it will come towards 700 and then make a new high. Now, compared to Infosys, TCS, they are already hovering towards 52-week high. And these stocks are already down 20% from their highs. So there will be some kind of relief rallies which will always come by. But if dollar does not pick up, and then what will happen? It might go momentarily upside towards 760, then again come back towards 700. So kind of range bound in this category. more importantly, it should not go back and touch towards 630 or so. So I would try to be away from these large cap stocks. Even I would say Tech Mahindra is an index stock. I would start focusing on the top 10, 12 Nifty stocks, right? That's where the entire market will be, and that's where you need to participate for your positional trades if you want to be lucrative and want to be on the positive side. So try trading in options, more so trading in the heavyweight stocks. So that's it from my side. I think next 2 months are going to be crucial. So till September end, try to stay a little bit away from the market, from the whipsaws of upside and downside. And after 10,600, 400, bottom getting made, October getting into place, good quality stocks, top heavyweights can be traded, right? So all the best, but trade less. That's where where the positional trade should be taken. But more so, you should focus on the heavyweights stocks in the October month. Thank you very much.